Just when you think it's a pretty typical wrestling weekend with Penn State putting a beatdown on Ohio State, Iowa coming out with a nice victory, and not a ton of upsets early on in the weekend, remember that things change drastically throughout a weekend in wrestling, especially this season. We'll be talking about Oklahoma State, who had a grand slam of a weekend. Iowa State had two incredible road dual meet victories, and there was a major shakeup at the 197 pounds weight class. A new number one has emerged. We'll be talking about all of this in this week's Wrestling Headlines presented by The Wrestling Consultant. So let's stop stalling and get on to our first headline of the day. And that is that a clear number one ranked wrestler has emerged at 197 pounds. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind who this should be. The crazy thing here for me is that this weight class is wild. In fact, there have been three new number one ranked wrestlers throughout the course of this season. There are three reasons why I actually think 197 pounds is so crazy. The first of those being that multiple national finalists have lost. That is national champion Max Dean of Penn State, who lost twice in the same weekend to Beard of Lehigh and Laird of Ryder. The other national finalist from last year being Jacob Warner of Iowa, who has multiple losses on this season. The second reason this weight class is so crazy to me is that multiple top 10 guys from the beginning of the season are not in the fold anymore. That's AJ Ferrari of Oklahoma State. And yes, granted, he wasn't in the preseason rankings. It was still iffy at the beginning of the year whether he was going to be in or not, but he was a national champion who is not in the 197 fold. Stephen Buchanan of Wyoming, who was my choice to win a national championship at the beginning of the season, has not returned because he's transferred from Wyoming to Oklahoma. And then another guy is Cordell Norfleet of Arizona State, who hasn't wrestled since Cliff Keen, Las Vegas. And the third reason why this weight class is so crazy is that the upsets have continued to happen throughout the course of the entire season. And this weekend was no stranger to that happening. One of the guys who was safe this weekend was Max Dean of Penn State, who got a pin over Gavin Hoffman. A couple other guys who were safe were Isaac Trumbull of NC State, Michael Beard of Lehigh, Bernie Truow of Cal Poly. But not everybody was safe. In fact, Zach Bronigal of Illinois lost twice this weekend. He got pinned by Silas Allred of Nebraska, who's the number 12 ranked guy in the country. And he also had a loss to Cam Caffey, who is a dangerous dude, let me just tell you that, of Michigan State. He beat Max Dean last season and will be title hunting this year. The other guy who lost this weekend, was Jacob Warner. He lost again, this time to Michael Foy of Minnesota in the last seconds with the takedown. And this seems to have happened, multiple times this year, at least it seemed. I don't know, I'd have to go back and analyze some of those matches that Warner's had, but it's just always so darn close. Now, the biggest thing that happened this weekend, in which led to the number one guy changing, is that Rocky Elam of Mizzou lost to Oklahoma State's Luke Serber. He lost by a score of 5-4, and this was huge in the Oklahoma State dual meet, which we'll get to in a second, but mostly for the 197 pounds weight class, because Rocky at this point was undefeated on the season up until now, until he just lost. The other thing that changed that happened as well was Nino Bonaccorsi beating Younger Bastida of Iowa State. He beat him by a score of 6-4, and he emerged now as the new number one. And let me tell you why he should be the clear number one, because Younger Bastida is a number 3 ranked guy in the country. He has had incredible wins this season. But Nino Bonaccorsi started this season as the number 10 ranked guy in the country by Flow Wrestling, which to me, I said at the beginning of the year, was insanely low. Now, I understand why, because he had losses at last year's Nationals. He lost to twice, actually. It didn't even place. He made the blood round. He lost to Gavin Hoffman and Rocky Elam at Nationals, so that's why he didn't place. But the year before that, he was a national finalist. Made the finals against AJ Ferrari. And this year, he's undefeated right now. At this point in the season, he's 12-0. Just recorded another big win over Younger Bastida. And it's exciting to see him this year because he doesn't just have that win over Bastida. He also has wins over Bronigal, who we just saw, of Illinois, and Michael Beard. He's wrestling with a new verve this year, which is exciting to me. And my takeaway here for 197 is that this weight class is emerging as not just for new number ones, but as one of my favorite to watch this season. I traditionally haven't been that excited to watch the upper weights, the 97s, the heavyweights, But 97 has made things very interesting, especially with guys at the top, Dean and Warner haven't been that exciting to wrestle. They get the job done. But guys that are in the fold now, like Younger Bastida and Nino Bonaccorsi and Stephen Buchanan, make things that much more exciting to watch. And that's the crazy thing about this weight, is that Buchanan actually transferred out of Wyoming a month or so back. I can only imagine how difficult it is dealing with a transfer as a college-age student. Like, I myself have many questions. When do you have to transfer out by? What are the eligibility rules? And how do you talk to another college coach without breaking any NCAA rules? Now, whether you're a current college-age student, high school recruit, or a parent of one of these, the absolute best way to get any of your questions answered is by talking to an expert. I recommend former NCAA coach Teague Moore, who has been through this. He understands the ins, outs, and intricacies of transfer rules, recruiting, and everything more you have questions about. My favorite part about all of this, though, is that Teague makes it simple for you to understand so you can be on your way with ease. You can get started with a free consultation by going to thewrestlingconsultant.com. Direct link is down in the description below. Thanks to The Wrestling Consultant for sponsoring this video. And the second headline is that Oklahoma State has a grand slam of a weekend. Of course, that is at the ballpark with the Oklahoma State wrestling Michigan. And this resulted in a upset, the first upset for Oklahoma State on the weekend. And it's funny because I was just talking the other week about how Oklahoma State has had an okay season, but like nothing that has impressed me that much. And here they go, impressing me, because they beat a top 10 ranked Michigan at this event. Now, they beat them 24-15. And granted, Michigan was out a few starters. They didn't have Cam Amin in the lineup, but the couple things to note here is that Reese Whitcraft, the 133-pounder for Oklahoma State, actually dropped down to 125. Trevor Mastro Giovanni is reportedly out of the lineup right now. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but he hasn't wrestled in a few weeks, and it seems that Whitcraft has stepped in from 33 to 25, and unfortunately he recorded 2 losses on the weekend, so that's not that exciting, but it's something to look out for Oklahoma State fans. Now, the other more impressive thing, by the way, is their win over Mizzou, and I'll get to that in a second. I want to talk about some other things with Bout at the ballpark, because while this is a fun event on paper, I'm not sure if we're going to see this around that much anymore, and the reason I say that is just because, unfortunately, the attendance hasn't been there. Like, we just haven't been getting that, like, 1,500, 2,000 fans or something along that line. Now, Dayton Fix, he excites the crowd, and I know Flow Wrestling hosted this event last year. Rockfin hosted it this year. I don't know. I think we're making it too difficult to watch these type of events, and even having it in Austin, Texas, without too much promotion. I actually don't think there's been much promotion of this event. Like, so I don't know if we're going to see this continue on in the future. We'll see. I don't know. I would like to see it. I like this, Oklahoma State hosting this, but we'll see. Again, that final dual meet score is 24-14, which leads us to the Mizzou dual meet. And this is where things got hype. I mean, man, I was not expecting this. I was expecting Mizzou. They are the top dogs in the Big 12, just like Penn State's top dogs in the Big 10. I know, Iowa State's in there too, okay? And I'll get to that in a second. But impressively, Oklahoma State beat Mizzou 17-16. They started at the 141 pounds weight class with Carter Young upsetting Alan Hart. That started the Cowboys out on a strong note here. Caden Feller pulled another upset at 157. O'Toole looked completely dominant here, and Peyton Mako got Mizzou back on the board too with a win against Plott at 174, which was an upset. And so this was a back-and-forth duel from top to bottom. But at this point, Oklahoma State was looking a little bit iffy. Were they going to be able to beat Mizzou, who were the top guys at the remainder of the weights? But that's where things got very interesting, because there was an upset that was recorded at 197. Of course, we already talked about that in the 97 pounds headline, but Luke Serber defeated Rocky Elam, the number 1 ranked wrestler, 5-4, which set the Cowboys up for a strong rest of the dual meet. It came down to the 133 pounds weight class, with Dayton Fix needing at least a major decision by 10 points or more to win the dual meet on criteria. Of course, he got the major decision, won by 11 points, giving Oklahoma State the criteria victory over Michigan, or over Mizzou, excuse me. 17-16, they beat the Tigers. Now, the next thing that we have to ask is what's going to happen with the schedule here, because it's going to come down to with Iowa State versus Mizzou. This is happening on February 15th. And yes, Oklahoma State still has Iowa in the lineup, but for the Big 12 title, it's going to come down to Iowa State versus Mizzou. If Iowa State wins, they win the Big 12. If not, they're going to split the title. My takeaway here is that Oklahoma State is a team to watch out for in the Big 12, especially Big 12 tournament time. I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination to say that they could win the Big 12. It's going to be a 3-team race right now, and I'm excited to see how things shake out. Let's talk some quick lightning headlines. The first one about Cornell, because Julian Ramirez upset Quincy Monday, and it was an exciting weekend for Cornell all around. You remember last year, Julian Ramirez upset Shane Griffith, national champion, at the beginning of the season, and this year he upset national finalist Quincy Monday at this point in the season. It was a great victory for the young wrestler and proving that this 65-pound weight class is continuing to be crazy. The other quick thing that I want to talk about is that Cornell won their 42nd Ivy League title with their win this weekend. They beat Penn on Sunday, 19-15. It was an exciting victory for Cornell Big Red. Yanni wrestled in his last ever home dual meet. The other thing I want to talk about is Nebraska, who recorded 3 straight Big Ten wins, with wins over Illinois and Purdue. They're going to be tested next week against Ohio State, and so I'll be watching that dual meet over the weekend. The other thing I have to mention, I mentioned at the top of the show, is Iowa State. What a road weekend they had. First, they beat West Virginia, which was actually tied going into the last two matches. They ended up pulling that out 20-13, and they beat Pitt, which came down to criteria, 16-15 based on their criteria. It was pretty much straight up. There were some exciting dual meets with Cole Matthews beating Swiderski. Panero Johnson stepped it up. David Carr is the man. Nino Bonaccorsi ended up getting the biggest victory of the dual meet at 197 pounds. 17-16 is what that score ended up. And the other thing that happened on the weekend for Pitt is that they actually beat UNC, showing that now they should win the ACC as long as they beat NC State. And the third headline is that Penn State and Iowa recorded solid weekends. I'm not surprised that Penn State beat Ohio State and Iowa beat Minnesota, but there were a couple things that happened within these dual meets that we should probably talk about. The first thing is that Penn State, they did dominate. They annihilated Ohio State, and I thought it was going to be I didn't think it was going to be this bad of a blowout, but ooh, man. Ohio State had only 2 wins at 125 pounds and at 149 pounds. Now, all the usuals for Penn State ended up winning. That is, of course, RBY, Bo Bartlett, Carter Sirachi, Aaron Brooks, Max Dean, and Greg Kirkfleet. It was a fun, exciting match in Columbus, but I think one of the interesting things to note here is that Levi Haynes ended up getting a win over Patty Gallagher, which this was at the beginning of the season supposed to be like a match to watch between 2 freshmen, and he put it to him 14-2 with getting near fall points on multiple occasions. The other match I got to talk about is Alex Facundo beating Carson Hartzela. He beat him 4-1, and Hartzela has kind of been struggling this year. I think ever since that injury at Cliff Key in Las Vegas, he's recorded 3 losses, and I'm not saying like that's resulting in everything, but it's kind of tough to see him lose after he's had such a incredible freshman season. Aaron Brooks, I mentioned, had a good win over Caleb Romero. And one match I want to talk about is Greg Kirkfleet, who ended up beating Tate Orndorff by bonus points. A top 20 ranked Orndorff. Kirkfleet stepping into that extra bonus points territory, which I love to see. After that loss to Mason Paris, now he's coming back with a new vigor in his system. It's like just so exciting to see that energy within him. Of course, the Nittany Lions beat Ohio State 29-9, and they ended up beating Indiana on Sunday, but there wasn't without the drama because Carter Sirachi all week was tweeting about Donnell Washington, said, God forgives, I don't. You should have killed me once you had a chance. Now I'm getting my lick back and some see you tomorrow, boy. I don't know if those were lyrics. I don't know if there's Sirachi just saying something, but he was calling out Washington all week on Twitter because that was one of his 2 collegiate losses. He beat him a couple of years ago in his redshirt freshman year, and then we see things got a little bit heated after Curtis Sirachi put the beat down on him. They started pushing each other. Jersey Jerry tweeted this out. He said DJ Washington got dominated, showed not 1 ounce of energy the last 2 periods in that match. Then all of a sudden, it's over, wants to act like he's going to throw a punch. Bad look. And I'll be honest, you see Kale and Cunningham on the mat there. I'll be honest, I kind of agree. It's like, I don't like seeing the punches being thrown after a match. Leave it all on the mat. I'm fine with the face, shoving, the pushing on the mat when you're wrestling, but not after the match. There seems to be some crazy beef between these two, which is just honestly fun to watch. And then Iowa, the other dominant Big Ten team, took out Minnesota 18-13. I think one of the impressive matches at the beginning of this dual meet when Pat McKee took Spencer Lee the distance. Now, he wasn't in the match like Spencer Lee was dominating him, but it was a decision. Spencer's first decision on the season. So, no, Spencer Lee will not bonus his way to a national title. We finally have that. But while Spencer Lee was upset, you could kind of tell, he wasn't too happy with his performance here. He did get his 50th straight win, which was exciting for me. I was watching for this. Him and RBY have 2 of the top win streaks in the NCAA right now. Spencer Lee recorded his 50th win here. The other big match from this dual meet was Kobe Siebrecht beating Brayton Lee. And he's been a guy, too, Brayton Lee, who was one of the top guys at the beginning of the season and kind of teetered off, unfortunately. He's been struggling this year. And I mentioned Michael Foy beating Jacob Warner. That was the other big match. Warner's 4th loss on the season, which is kind of tough to see. He's been struggling. As a national finalist, he really shouldn't have these losses. But this weight class is crazy, so I will say that. The other cool thing that happened here, no, there weren't any fights here, but Gable Steveson came back and got his ring at intermission. Always love to see stuff like that. Iowa ended up winning this dual meet 18-13. Over Minnesota. My takeaways here is that Iowa still has some work to do. They got Michigan and Oklahoma State left. Penn State, I think, should cruise through the rest of the season, but I think Iowa should take out both of those teams, but, I don't know. I really don't know. Now, if you want to check out who the worst recruits are who have won national titles, I recommend you check out this video. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe to Fanco Wrestling so you can stay updated on all the latest wrestling headlines.